Welcome to All Things Sci-Fi and Fantasy with your host, John Yarrow, and guest Nicholas Keating Casbarro.
Well, we have a number of people on. Let's welcome everyone to Science Fiction and Fantasy Live, All Things Science Fiction and Fantasy. And today our guest is Nick Keating Casbarro. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. And he's author of Vitalarium, and I don't remember the rest of the title.
Descent into the Void.
There you go. And I did read that book. I really enjoyed it. That's quite a crazy world you've built. That's kind of almost space opera, and the fact that it's so huge, but you really just focus down on that one particular city and on a planet, and that's the only city on the planet, right?
Right. So
Got to be huge.
it's supposed to be massive. The idea is that the city is so large you can actually see it from orbit.
Nice.
The city you're referencing is Kairos. It's the only basically real inhabited portion of the planet. This planet that the entire story essentially takes place on is the last human colonized planet that we have reached so far. It's just the last one that we've reached, terraformed, etc.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's like a rising power. So there's not everything that you would normally expect to see on a lot of the other planets. A lot of the planet is mostly just the wild. It's untamed jungle, essentially.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, the inhabited portion, is just everything that they've built up until this point. So about 250 years or so that we've been on the planet. Yeah. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, by the way. I really enjoyed your book as well.
Well, thanks. I think you read the first one, Future's Dark Past.
I did. I'll have to get a copy of the second one now that we're good to go.
Yeah. Well, we're sort of good to go. We've released the ebook. The publisher wanted to do a soft launch and collect some reviews, and see where we go in the ranking before the hardback comes out. And there's two reasons for that. One is the company's merging, and we're just waiting for that to happen. And then there'll be a marketing effort to go along with that. So we're just waiting for that to finalize, right? And then the second one is we've had a supply chain issue anyway with the book. So I was hoping to get not ARCs, but a batch of books early to send out, and that just hasn't happened. And unfortunately, I have an NDA, so I can't say a whole lot more than that. But I've been blessed to say that. So that's kind of where we're at with the book too. But it's still getting a lot of good reviews from bloggers that I've sent it to in the past, and now we'll see what happens with the rest of the world.
There's always a funky period right before you get a book to market, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a tense enough time as it is because you're scrambling to get everything you need to get done.
Yeah.
And then, there's always the unforeseen obstacles. I've run into plenty of my own issues as we were getting to market. I realized that there was a huge issue with the with my book cover that I didn't notice for some reason because I was zooming through everything else when I got this one to market. And I had to go back and have my graphic designer fix some things, and I didn't realize that basically some small details, which turned out to be a little bit more glaring than I thought, just needed to be edited. And we ended up, thankfully, getting it done, everything on time. But, the publishing process it's not as fun as the writing process. We'll just say that.
Hey, Megan and Mary, thanks for joining. We're just talking all things sci-fi and fantasy, and Nick and I are talking about our books. So, are you self-published then?
No, so I have a publisher.
All right.
But I have been working. I have some pretty unrealistic goals for what I plan to do with this series. I'll say that point blank. I'll say that acknowledging my own, I guess, ludicrous expectations for what I plan to turn this into. But I have a graphic designer who helps me with a lot of other marketing things, and I just trust him a lot with the artwork specifically.
Okay.
I had him do the cover while the publisher basically took care of the rest of it.
Okay.
Yeah, they thought I was nuts when I went to them, and they were like, "Okay, we're going to introduce you to the guy who does our book covers," and I was basically like, "I'm good,"
Yeah.
which I'm sure doesn't really happen all that often with them. But this guy had done such good work for me prior to this.
Yeah.
He's my guy. I got to go to him. I'm in. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, so I do have a publisher. It's Atmosphere Press, and it is a hybrid publisher. They've done pretty well by me thus far. They've provided a lot of resources for very little. Let's just say that. So it's been a good experience so far.
yeah.
And it's been great just learning this whole process, because as I think I mentioned to you, this is my first book. This is literally the first thing I've written
Yeah.
in, I'd say, almost a decade, other than a professional email. So it's
Yeah.
it's been an interesting process, and certainly a learning process.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to write your first book? I mean, you've probably been asked that before.
Yeah, give or take about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
The publishing process was 10 months, then 2.5 years. So altogether, to get it to market, a little bit over 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a while. Yeah.
How about you? Because you've got a pretty intricate storyline, and you've got a lot of, I mean, just the time jumps in general. As I was going through your book, it's intricate. It's extremely detailed, and despite the fact it's very easy to follow. How long did it take you? It's you and your wife, correct?
Yes, I write with my wife Leanne. So I'm out of the JL Yarrow. I'm John, and she's Leanne, and we just went with JL. So it's funny because I won't tell the whole story, but back when my son got his driver's license and was gone, I started writing again, and so I started writing this novel, and I kind of gotten most of the way through it, and my wife's like, "You're spending a lot of time doing this. Are you any good at it?" And so I entered a couple contests, and I was a finalist in both of them. So she's like, "Oh, you are good." So she's, she would read it and give me her opinion, but she actually started trying to help edit and look at, typos and things like that. And so as the time went on, she just became more and more involved in it. And at one point, and I'm not really sure when, I started in 2015, and we were done, well, let me take it back. We were done with that first draft that won the awards by 2016. And then in 2018, my publisher, I met with him, and he said that the beginning did not have enough character development, and there was not a Death Star ending at the end. So I went back and added 4 chapters to the beginning and a Death Star ending at the end. And so that was a new revision, right? So
Yeah.
So it's taken a number of iterations, but when you're working, I work with Lou Aronica, and his first author was Ray Bradbury, right?
Nope.
He was a publisher for, and then he was a publisher for all the Star Wars stories that were post the trilogy, right? The Star Wars people wanted to keep all the prequel stuff. They didn't care about what he did afterwards. So all those guys, Zahn and all those guys, he was the publisher for. So, and I'm not sure, I guess about 15 years ago, he decided he wanted to break out into his own publishing company and really focus on new writers and, authors. And so that's how I got involved with him. So I really trusted his opinion, and it worked out really well. And, you've read the book, so you know how it starts with a bang and just keeps building from there.
It definitely does. But I was going to say that's relatively fast. At least a year or two, the initial award submission. You said
Yeah.
I guess I'm almost jealous. It must be helpful to have the extra set of eyes and the extra. That's
Yeah.
because that's an interesting dynamic. I've never personally heard of that. Although funny enough, I do have at least a similar origin story of how my wife became probably my toughest beta reader
Yeah.
She's harsh.
Yeah.
She's a surgeon, and
Oh,
she's very, we'll say, meticulous.
there you go.
She picked out some plot holes in the beginning and some things where she just came to me and she was like, "You need to change this."
Yeah.
All right, if that's what you think, and I'll tell you what, she's got great judgment.
Oh, good, good. Yeah.
Just
Leanne was complaining about one scene, and this is when we really became a writing team. And I just looked at her and said, "Well, if you don't like it, why don't you just rewrite it?" And it caught her off guard. She'd been doing the editing piece for so many years, and all of a sudden she turned around and she, knocked it out. I said, that's really good. I mean, I made some changes to it. And so now we go back and forth and I like lay down the first track and then she adds a lot of flavor to it, character, especially with the female characters. She's really strong at going, a woman would never do that. Oh, well, okay. And she'll rewrite it. So it's a good combination. We enjoy doing it. We take a lot of walks together and talk about scenes and chapters and stuff like that. So it's something as when I retire, in the next few years, we'll be able to continue doing together, and it'll be a lot of fun.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a really cool dynamic. So the story basically just kind of comes together layer by layer then.
Yeah. I did a 3x6 to cover my desk, and I drew years on it, for the timeline, and then I put chapters so to track where everything was, so that I would make sure everything was lined up correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then that really helped in book one. In book two, I did a spiral on my whiteboard. I had a huge whiteboard, which I don't have anymore. And then one day my wife came home and I had, when my publisher said we're merging, we want to use you, but, keep publishing you, but we need to see the outline for all three books. So I wrote an outline for all three books. And I'm more of a panzer writer. I'm more organic than just.
Say that again? I'm more of a what writer?
Pants on fire writer. You just write organically, and versus plotting everything out and having a total detailed outline so you know what's in every chapter and whatever, building out the scenes and all that before you even start writing. I don't do that. But they wanted to see an outline, so I wrote an outline, and at the end I put I reserve the right to change any and all things based on character development. But then we were trying to figure out what to put in each book, so I had all these sticky pads with all the chapters for book 1, 2, and 3, and I had them up. I stuck them up on my wall with, since the sticky notes weren't sticking, I was using tacks. And my wife came and said, "What did you do to my wall?" But I was moving them around, and so yeah, it is very complex, but I've enjoyed writing it.
That's awesome, man. That's really awesome. I love hearing about how something comes to fruition.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a little bit of an extra layer to the story as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look deep enough between the lines, you can kind of see where some of the inspirations came from for things.
Yeah. The first chapter, excuse me, I really, reading a lot of new authors and seeing a lot of new authors struggle, especially since you realize, Amazon publishes 2 to 3 million novels a year, worldwide. That's heavy competition. And, you go to, went to a lot of conferences and a lot of master classes and things like that to learn. And they're all like, if you don't grab them in the first paragraph, they're not going to keep reading. And if you don't grab them in the first page, continue to grab them, they're not going to read. And they've got to get 2 or 3 pages into it before they're hooked, before they want to continue reading, right? And they go, "Oh, I want to buy this." When people look at books, they first look at the cover, a lot of them look at the jacket. Very few of them look at the recommendations, because everybody has recommendations, right?
Right. And most people outside the writing world don't even really know who the editorial reviewers are.
Yeah. Well, I had David Brin as one of my review blurbs on my book in the very few people know who he is because he's an old-time sci-fi writer, right? So, so it's really based on your cover, and then that first page, and well-written 2 pages after that, to where they like the character, they get invested in the character, and want to read on.
Hooking everyone is it's definitely something that presents a challenge if you, especially at the beginning, if you haven't fully developed the character even in your mind necessarily. Yeah. That was see, the funny thing about, at least about my story, is my story actually started from a history, believe it or not, which was, it's the first thing in the book. It starts in the history, then you have the prologue and this and that, because I was setting the scene basically in my head as I was creating this entire story. Funny enough, that started as a few years back. I was investing in this kind of niche AI company that wanted to have almost like a gamified, playable, almost like a video game aspect to it.
Yeah.
And to be able to craft that world, they said, well, we need to have a history so that we can build off of that and create this world that people are going to enter in and utilize this AI system.
Yeah.
And so I was one of the investors. I was looking to get a little bit more involved in a side project. I don't sit still very well. I need to be doing multiple things at once. So I wrote this history for them, and I ended up basically separating for them at one point because I didn't like where they were going. They didn't seem to have as much of a direction as I was hoping for them to have.
Yeah.
And so I just separated for them. But now I had this history, and I changed some things around, and I started building it out, and I was like, well, where can I take this? At the time, I was literally on a plane 3 to 5 days a week for my day job. I'm in medical devices.
Okay.
And so I'm traveling the country literally all the time. And it got to a point where I beat Netflix. I was done. I was downloading episodes to shows I didn't even want to watch.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I need to be doing something that's at least semi-productive. And I said, well, I've got this history. Well, let me see where I can take this. And I got on a flight. It was from Miami to Hawaii. I remember this. And on that flight, I just said, well, let's see where this goes. And I started writing, and I got off the plane, and I was typing in the title for chapter 4. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. I need to plan this out a little bit. So I storyboarded for like the next 2 days. It was just pouring out of me at that point because I was pulling from ideas that I had always had. I've always been kind of like a head up in the clouds guy, like the space out kid in class, like that was me. I had other things going on up here, and I took from so many different ideas that I had to put this story together. And I just started realizing, like, I know exactly what I want to write about. Like, it just kind of came to me like that. So from then on, I basically, once again, I'm still on a plane 3 to 5 days a week. That became my writing time. And so my writing office was 36,000 feet in the air. That's where the majority of the entire book was written. I don't know what it is about being on a plane, but for some reason, I find it to be extremely relaxing. And like, I'm just able to hone in. Maybe it's because I am a millennial. Maybe it's because I'm not connected to the internet and I don't have any of those distractions. But yeah, I found that to be just an amazing place to get this story out, and here we are.
There you go.
So I'll book some more flights so I can finish book 2 now.
So have you, what have you done to work on your craft besides just continuously writing and editing? Have you taken any classes, or you gone to any conferences or anything like that?
Definitely some conferences. I've gone to, funny enough, I've also been doing a lot of conventions lately.
Yeah.
I have personally found that Comic-Cons have been a great place for this because there's a lot of crossover with sci-fi and the Comic-Con crowd. I mean, there's been a lot of interest gathered there. I've been able to network with a lot of people, meet a lot of people. I was just at MegaCon in Orlando, which I think is like the number 2 or number 3 biggest. It might be number 2 now. I can't remember, but it's absolutely gigantic. Like more than 100,000 attendees. You can meet everyone there. I mean, I got pictures with Mel Gibson and Ron Howard while I was there, just because every celebrity imaginable is there. I'm getting a little bit off topic. I'm pretty prone to give a heads up there. But as far as improving the craft, I'd like to do more. The conferences have been helpful, like the writing conferences and things I've gone to. But I've been finding that trying to market this book and trying to get everything out there has been such a full-time job that I really just haven't had the time as much as. And I also feel that, at least for me, I'm beginning to really hone in on my own voice by just continuing to write. What's that old adage? What is it? The college pottery class, where the teacher takes 2 different classes and he says to one class, "I want you to focus on just making the perfect pot," and then he says to the other class, "Just make as many pots as humanly possible." Throughout the course of the semester. And the people who just made pots and made pots and made pots made the better pots, like significantly better than anyone on the side who was just making that one pot.
Yeah.
That for me is kind of, it's not the perfect analogy, but for me, just continuously writing and making sure that I am writing, if not every day, at least 3 to 4 times a week. The next book is coming fast, so I'm literally already almost halfway through it now.
Nice. I was going to ask about that.
I may have to split it into 2 books. It's funny enough. The first book was everything in this entire storyline that I ended up splitting in half and saying, okay, here's the first book and here's the second book. The second book now may end up being 2 separate books, just because I'm taking the time to make sure that I don't take any shortcuts. And that seems to be working well. Like I said, I've got my beta reader. She's downstairs at the moment. I try and get through at least 1 round of editing of my work before I hand it off to her. I know you mentioned that. Well, remind me again. You said your wife asked you, like, "Hey, are you any good at this?"
Yeah, back at the beginning. Yeah.
That's funny enough. My wife, we were on vacation. We were actually in the Florida Keys. We were on vacation, and we're sitting by the pool, having some drinks, and I'm typing at the computer, and she couldn't believe that she thought I was working. She's like, "What are you doing?" Like, we're on vacation. I was like, "Me too, I'm writing." She was like, "What have you been writing? Like, I know you've been writing this thing, but like, how fun, like, send me a little bit of it." And I was like, all right. So I basically stopped writing the chapter that I was writing. I edited the last chapter, and then I sent her everything that I had edited up to that point.
Yeah.
Go easy on me. And she started reading it, and she was like, "This is actually really good." Like, and then she had some much harsher words about certain parts that I did end up changing, but she was like kind of taken aback, and even, as someone who had not shown this to anyone yet, I was kind of like, "Oh, she actually likes this, like this." Yeah, that's kind of cool. And then, from there on out, I just, every time I reached like the next 3 to 4 chapters, I would go through and edit them, and then I would send them to her. My wife her name's Marissa, and she has been incredibly helpful in making sure that I can identify things. It's always, as you know, probably better than anyone, it's great to have that second set of eyes to make sure that you're catching things, because
it's really more important to have more than one set of eyes too. I'm going to stop for a second and say hi to Karen and Maddie and Mary for joining and watching. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I'm also part of a writing group, and there's 4 of us in the writing group, and we edit each other's work. And I find when you edit other people's work, that just helps you be a better writer as well, because start to see things. Because at the end of the day, once you're so close to stuff you're writing, sometimes you can't see the trees for the forest. You miss those. Your eyes just glaze over the typos because you're so involved in the actual content of the story versus the technical piece, right? So,
100%.
yeah. So,
And hi, Karen. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So Karen sent the message in.
so but I like having a lot of people and beta readers and helping to scope out, the storyline. And then once all that's done, and my wife and I have gone through it probably a dozen times, right? I mean, I'm sending her version E of book 3. We're in the 40s now, and it's 60 chapters long. And she'll send me back version F, and then version G will be probably the final version. And then once we've got that all set, then we send it to the publisher, and then he has his line editors who come in, and we got to go through the whole thing again, right? So you go through that, and then they hire a copy editor to proof it for typos and grammar and things like that. And then you have the print edit where it has to, look right on the book and things like that. And I've also found one of the biggest things that for me that really helps is when you print your book. I mean, actually print it in like print format and start reading it. You go, oh. You catch a lot of stuff like that, man.
It's different than when it's on the screen, right?
Amazing, yeah. It's amazing what you see on paper versus on the screen.
Yeah.
So.
I went through. Grammar. I could.
Yeah.
If anything, I could probably use a grammar lesson refresher.
Yeah.
I went through 6 rounds of proofreading with my publisher.
I also use a ProWrite 8, and that helps a lot too. But sometimes you have to, especially in dialogue, you have to kind of ignore it. And Karen, I saw your question. I'll have to DM you later about how my book trailer is going. Right now, my publisher's still working on that. I haven't seen anything, so we'll just go from there. And Miss Tay, thanks for joining. We're just talking about our books. So switching gears a little bit. So what do you like to read when you're not writing?
I have the last book I read. I can't even necessarily say read. I listened to it because I'm moving around so much. As I mentioned before, I haven't quite written my way out of my day job yet, but I am slowly working on it.
Yeah.
But I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which was phenomenal. Really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
I like sci-fi. I've been a sci-fi fan since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I started honestly with films. I started with just Star Wars on VHS. My father had the trilogy, and I remember watching them with him when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
And then I graduated from that into Star Trek and started getting into. I'm a big horror guy. Always been a big fan of horror, and from there. Then you start getting into school, and I started reading, R.L. Stine and those horror, the horror books. And when I was still fairly young, started reading the Cirque du Freak series, that was young. Then Harry Potter, and then I got to Dune. My father had all these old books from when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He gave me Dune, and I was probably like, I don't know, I was like maybe 14.
Yeah. 13,
14. I don't think I was even quite in high school yet, but I read that book and I was like, this is fucking cool. Like this. So to be able to, because that was like the real first sci-fi, true hard sci-fi book that I was like, oh, I am all in on this. And to be able to see that go to the big screen, in the past few years has been really cool for me because that was really one of the influential, I guess, franchises in my writing life.
Yeah.
And then obviously I got to high school and you start getting to the high school curriculum and you've got the dystopian classics, the 1984, the Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. You get like Animal Farm and you get all that kind of stuff, which obviously, as I'm sure you can see, that dystopian feel has definitely influenced my own writing. I love that. I don't even know why I love it, because it can be very doom and gloom at times, but at the same time, it kind of gives you a foreshadowing of what can happen if we don't straighten up and if we were to just fuck everything up. And I like that because I think there's a lot of value to that. Especially in today's society. I think it's more important now than ever as we start, verging on, AI integration and everything else that's happening in society. It's good to try and foresee the pitfalls of humanity, the ways that we can screw it up before we actually get to them.
Yeah. And that's part of what I do in my series, right?
Yeah, of course.
Raising Red Flag. And I want to say hi to Danielle. She's one of my book talk reviewers, so I appreciate her joining too. So I read a ton of sci-fi, and I read fantasy fiction too. I cut my teeth on Conan the Barbarian back in high school, college, and I've read a lot of fantasy series, Lord of the Rings, all those, and I love sci-fi as well. And but lately, I've been reading the last 3 books I've read, or 2.5 books, for the middle of this book, have been romanticises, which are romance/fantasy books, right?
Isn't that like the newest popular thing?
I know. Well, I remember when I did that what's in my Kindle contest. Let me pick my next one, and I just finished yours, and man, these people came out of the woodwork for D.B. Moore's Glowing Hearts, which looks like a real romance novel. And I was like, oh, great, she won. I'm going to have to read this thing. And so I started reading, and I liked it. It was set in a fantasy world, and 90% of it's true fantasy. And then there's some parts that kind of make you blush. But so then, and in a couple of weeks, I have Abigail Owen, who's a New York Times best-selling author, coming on the live. And so I said, well, I need to read some of her stuff. So when I talk to her, I'll actually. So I read her The Road King, and it was really good. It was about shape-shifting dragons and wolves in modern day society, and it's just a really complex story and very, very high energy all the way through. And but again, there's some parts that made me blush. Right? Whoa! I'm not used to reading that.
You gotta close the door when you read those parts.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm reading The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarrow, and it's about dragons, and it's a really good fantasy story too. But there's some parts that make you blush. And I saw a post with her, and she was doing an interview with an audience, and the interviewer said, "So, what does your family think about your writing?" She goes, "Well, my son's right up there," and he goes in the audience, and he leans over and goes, "I can't believe my mom writes some of that stuff." It's like, whoa, yeah. But she's a great writer too. So I'm going to finish that, but then I'm going to jump back into some sci-fi, because I got several other. One of the things that's happened on TikTok as I've grown is I've gotten to know a lot of other authors, and so I'm reading theirs, and like I met you, and did your review, and so I'm doing their reviews as well as doing pushing my own book forward, because it's a community and we want to help each other out. So I've got several lined up that I've got to read and get through.
Thank you for your insightful review, by the way. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
I owe you one myself. As I mentioned, I just finished your book fairly recently, so it's on my to-do list. I promise. I'll get to it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or maybe tonight if I'm as long as I don't have too many of these.
There you go. Book Talk is great for the community, but what really helps sell books is getting our people on to not only do Book Talk reviews, but to go on to Amazon and Goodreads, right?
Oh yeah.
Drop them there, because there's a lot of people, readers, who don't do Book Talk or TikTok, and you need to reach out to them. So you need to reach out to more than just the people who like video and being part of a community, because there's a lot of people who read that don't do that. So, and fortunately, I've been blessed with all the book talkers who have done my reviews They've also done Amazon reviews and good reviews, but kind of have to ask, right? And say, will you do that for me, please? So
Yeah.
your reviews, make sure you push and ask to get them on Amazon too.
You know what I actually did? I just I went to Vistaprint. This was before the last convention that I went to.
Yeah.
And I printed off a bunch of bookmarks. And on one side of the bookmark, it's got a picture of a cat. I wish I had. Oh, you know what? I might have one.
Hey, Addie, how you doing? Thanks for joining.
I had a bookmark made. It's got one's got the protagonist and one's got another character that I had to develop. But it's literally got a leave a review right on there, and then on the other side you can visit the website.
There you go.
You scan the QR code because I'm once again trying to get reviews when you're
Yeah.
building yourself up. It's of utmost importance, right? So my goal was to try and make it as easy as humanly possible.
That's what you need to do. But we, on our business card, on the back, it's got the QR codes for both books. So I get that. So
That's nice.
yeah. So tell me about your second book, or about the series in general, right? Where do you see your series going?
So I have 7 books planned.
Oh, God. 7.5 now, right? Because you're going to split book 2 into 2.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, I have some pretty unrealistic and grand expectations for this series, but
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, man. I've got some kind of internal force that's just driving me to write this.
Yeah.
I plan to take this to a place where, and it's ambitious, but I plan to try and create an explanation for the crux where science fiction, multiverse theory, simulation theory, and religion all meet. To kind of give you a broad strokes of it, of where I plan to take this, which sounds fairly complicated when you put it like that, but giving myself this, I guess, breadth to be able to explain where I want to go with this, it makes more sense because let me put it to you like this. This will be a good way to explain it. So I've broken the book up into 3 segments.
Okay.
The first segment is going to be planetary, which is it's just happening on planet Yarrow. The second segment, which will be a couple of books, is going to be galactic, where we are, I think I mentioned it in the book, there are 7 colonized human planets in the Vitellarian universe. Earth being the first, and then Dioram being the last. And we start visiting the other planets as we try to achieve a certain goal. I won't give that part away yet because you'll find out exactly what that goal is as it's revealed to Roman at the end of the book. But the third segment, that's when we start getting weird. And we really start introducing some things that would be, I guess we'll call them novel, and some interesting conflicts that are going on in the background of all of the what will eventually seem like minutia in the first book. It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get real weird, John.
Yeah. Well, I've finished book 3, and we kept it to a trilogy. And there really we could probably have expanded it out to several other books because it's time travel and you can jump to do a lot of different things and there's a lot of characters involved. But I knew I also had another series called The 5 Known Worlds, which is kind of a Dark Forest version, the Dark Forest version, my Dark Forest version, I should say, coming that I'm going to be writing, and that one will be a number of books as well. So I wanted to get
So this is a whole separate series you've got? I'm sorry?
Pardon me?
I thought you said this is a whole separate series that you're writing?
Yeah, well, I'm getting ready to write. I've got a high-level outline for it.
I thought I was ambitious.
So, well, time travel is great, and I've tried to keep it as mainstream as possible because, a lot of people don't like to read time travels in sci-fi. But I think the Five Known Worlds is more of a dark forest / space opera kind of series that's linear. That'll be more mainstream, right? So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun writing this series and getting to the end and wrapping it all up. And leaving just a little taste of what's about to come next. It's still linked. It's just different.
Well, you say a lot of people don't like to read time travel, but it's a lot of time travel is not an easy thing to write.
That's true.
I mean, just in terms of the tracking. I mean,
yeah.
Talk about the proneness. Prone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably not a word. You're very prone to plot holes and things like that as you're beginning to construct the plot.
Yeah.
But you did it pretty well. I got to tell you, like I enjoyed your book.
Oh, thanks.
So, I think it can be tough. It gets a bad rap, but that's because I think a lot of people just haven't done it well. So you don't sell it short.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Enjoy it. It's gotten a lot of accolades. Book 2 was a finalist in the Book Viral Millennial Contest, and that's a mainstream contest. So to get a sci-fi book into a finalist for mainstream fiction contest is, pretty good in itself. So I was pretty proud of that. There are only five or six finalists out of I don't know how many thousands of books. So it's got a lot of good reviews. So I'm pretty excited about it. Got to get it off the ground. So,
good for you. Congratulations. That's awesome.
yeah. So, one of the guys that I interviewed, Claude, who's a great book talk reviewer. One of the questions he asked me was, so if you had to do a Mount Rushmore for fantasy fiction, who would be your top 4 authors? So I'm going to throw that to you. I'm going to convert it though to sci-fi and go, if you had to do a Mount Rushmore, who would be your top 4 sci-fi authors that you? I'm putting you on the spot like he did me. I had to really. At the very end, I go. I only had 3, and at the very end, I go. Oh, I forgot Tolkien. He says, "Bingo, you got your 4."
Oh yeah,
Yeah, but I'm going sci-fi with you, so you can't use Tolkien.
That's it, and I won't. Although he certainly deserves to be up there.
Yeah.
Although he is kind of more fantasy as well.
Yeah, he is.
For what he's for Lord of the Rings. I mean, for what he's known for. But I would have to say, George Washington. He'd have to be for me, Frank Herbert. Would have to be Dune.
Yeah, Dune. Yeah.
Just some of the concepts that he came up with were fascinating and very, very unique. Just the idea of, basically traveling without really the way that the Spacing Guild utilizes the spice to travel between different planets.
Yeah.
Completely, that's miles away from anything else. Like when I designed my FTL, I specifically was like, well, I need to do something different than him because I don't want to, I love the idea of having a pseudo-modern in terms of living in some form or fashion the way that we do today in the future. Yes. And part of creating, my answer for FTL was possibly stemming from my own desires to kind of traverse the cosmos, which, who knows? We'll see. With all these drones we're seeing in the sky, who knows? Maybe it'll pop up in the news tomorrow. We figured it out. But I based mine on the Alcubierre drive.
Yeah.
Which is the idea that you create, he describes it as like a bubble around a vessel that's basically created by a machine to be able to warp space-time around the bubble. I described it as a way to, as a field that you create that basically allows whatever is within the field to negate the laws of relativity, which is why you don't experience the same kind of time dilation when you travel at these absolutely gigantic, ginormous distances. So Frank Herbert, and he was a user of psychedelics, which is also very interesting, makes a lot of sense as to why spice was what it was.
Yeah.
He just very, very visionary. So he'd be on there for me. Trying to think who else. Definitely George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, because they really formulated that kind of dystopian feel that I'm aiming for in terms of I like to explore elements of philosophy.
Yeah.
I try not to make it like a textbook, because no one wants to read a textbook, right? I try and fit the philosophical examination of what's going on in between the lines of what I'm writing about, in terms of humanity's penchant for power grabbing, why power always wants more power, and the more power you have, the more fear you have of losing it, and just different elements of the human condition are very fascinating to me. I've always been very interested in philosophy as well. So I put them up there. I would put, trying to think of who else I would put on there.
So you got three, and they were all very good choices from the past. Let's let the fourth one be a current day.
Okay, I've got one more who's definitely number 5 then.
Okay.
And so number 4, I'll say Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Oh yeah.
Who's phenomenal. Did you read Children of Time?
Yeah, I was going to say Children of Time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Absolutely super interesting when it came to just the concepts of evolution and basically like evolutionary tampering and how it potentially affected a whole nother planet of entirely different beings.
Oh,
I mean, stories about spiders.
I know those spiders were scary too, man. I read that and going, yeah, because I'm not a big spider person, so that was like, oh wow.
Yeah, not a book for the arachnophobes. Yeah. but it was a phenomenal book. The way that he wrote it, despite being incredibly accurate with the way that he was describing different things, and because I pride myself with medical accuracy in my book, because I'm in medical devices. My wife's a surgeon, so she's definitely coming to me anytime there's any kind of wonky science in there. She's going, this isn't right, you need to change this. So I definitely pride myself in that. That was super interesting, the way that he set up that world. Yeah. And the way he did it, I found it fascinating. So
you said you had a 5th.
Isaac Asimov.
Oh yeah.
100. I probably should have mentioned him as number 1.
Yeah, because you think of like Foundation, you look at what he was writing back then, it was so futuristic and so out there that people didn't. It was just amazing, right?
It's like someone was giving him the secrets.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Hunter Colburn was going back in time and telling him.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
But no, for me, I love his short stories actually.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who literally coins the term robot.
Yeah. Yeah.
He writes a story. It's probably my favorite short story of all time. It's called The Final Question. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
It's okay. I highly recommend. You can literally go on YouTube and listen to it.
Cool.
He packs so much power into, I think it's 12 pages long.
Oh wow!
That it's a portion of it is I don't want to say it's what I strive to or what I'm trying to accomplish, but well, no, I'll say it's what I strive to over the course of this series, because I want to add more flavor and make it a little bit more entertaining and engaging, and bring people along for the long run. But for the message that it perceives, it is profound. I'm not just scientifically profound, not just philosophically profound, but like existentially profound.
Yeah.
I would probably say this would be, I don't know where, whoever came up with simulation theory thought of it, but this is like if there's a patient zero, it's this story, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend it. The final question. If there are like if I were to rank, all of the top things that I've read that have influenced me, that was absolutely, without a doubt, number one. And it's just because it's so out there, and to think that this guy was writing this stuff in like, what was it, like 1930?
Yeah.
It's
futuristic, and I read a lot of the stuff, and then Foundation was a mind-boggling book for me, and then to see the series on Apple and the way they envisioned it was just like, I'm sure that's how he thought the world looked like, right? So the worlds and how they did things. It's just mind-boggling. So I really enjoyed it. And so for me, I think also, there's a lot of good authors out these days, but those classic ones are just, they're the ones who actually started the genre and kept it going. And, so that's why you want a Mount Rushmore of, those kind of people. So cool. So we're almost out of time. Oh, hang on. Why is it doing that? Oh, there we go. I had to slide this thing across so it wasn't going to let me back in. A timer thing. Tell everyone one more time about your book. So before we go, and I'll tell them about mine, and then we'll sign off.
Sure. So my book is called Vitellarium: Descent into the Void. It's book one in the 7, potentially 8 book series, and it's basically a dystopian space opera thriller, following roughneck freelancer Roman Matthews as he becomes embroiled in a massive conspiracy that has the authoritarian government of his planet hunting him. He has to band together with kind of an unlikely crew of allies to be able to survive the ordeal. And toward the end of this segment, you'll learn that there is a lot more, a much, much larger conflict going on in the background.
And he gets a love interest.
And you get a love interest. That is right.
Yeah.
There's more to come on that. You have to. You got to round the character out well, right? So.
Well, that's one of the biggest questions I get asked is, when are Kristen and Hunter going to connect, right? And then you're just going to have to keep reading.
Build that tension, John.
Yeah, exactly. So I have 2 books, Future's Dark Past, which is the first in the trilogy. Future Unfolds just released this week in ebook and will come out in hardback sometime in March. It's the sequel, and it's more based on they're trying to stop an event from happening where they blow up a mosque, and that triggers this purge war at the end of the century. So they've traveled to that time period and some other time periods to try and stop those events from happening. So Kristen and Hunter are still deeply involved in trying to right the world so that we don't wipe out the planet and keep ourselves from destroying ourselves. Well, I really appreciate your time. It's hard to believe. We were talking beforehand. It's like, how's this work? I said, man, we just talk. Before you know it, the hour's up.
Well, I'll tell you what, I enjoyed this a lot. I think we should definitely do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, you've got a schedule of other people that you want to have on, but
yeah,
down the line, let's definitely do this again. Hopefully we'll have more of book 2 ready to go.
Yeah. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to have Abigail Owen on, and she's a New York Times bestselling author who writes romantasy. And then next week, I'm not going to have a guest. I'm going to do a director's cut or author's cut of the first chapter of Future Unfolds. I'm going to narrate it and explain why things are happening, or why I had things happen the way I did in that first chapter. So that'll be next Wednesday, and then the Wednesday after that, we'll have another one, and who knows after that.
All right.
All right, man, take care. Enjoy, and good luck writing your second book and getting it out.
Thank you, and same to you. It's been an absolute pleasure, John.
All right, take care. See you. Bye.
You too.
Thank you for joining All Things Sci-Fi and Fantasy with John Yarrow and guest Nicholas Keating Casbarro.